What if a little boy's heartfelt plea to a wealthy man, "Can you be my daddy?" unveiled a story of loss, love, and unimaginable transformation? Jason Harlow lived in a sprawling mansion surrounded by luxury, but his life was far from fulfilling. Despite his wealth and success as a self-made millionaire, Jason was haunted by an emptiness he couldn't escape. Years ago, he lost his younger brother Michael after a bitter argument, a loss that left scars he never addressed. To the world, Jason was an icon of power and ambition. Behind closed doors, he was a man burdened by regret, isolated by his inability to connect with others. His days were consumed by work, while his nights were spent in silence. The mansion, once filled with dreams, had become a hollow fortress. Even his staff, led by the strict and loyal butler, Mr. Thomas, walked on eggshells around him, adhering to rigid rules to avoid upsetting their aloof employer. Across town, Emma Scott lived a life of resilience and struggle. A single mother to 8-year-old Ethan, she worked tirelessly to make ends meet, juggling multiple jobs while ensuring her son felt loved and cared for. Their small apartment was far from luxurious, but it was filled with warmth, an oasis of love in a world that seemed to test Emma's strength at every turn. Ethan was the light of her life. His boundless curiosity and innocent optimism gave her the strength to push through the toughest days. Yet, deep down, Emma wished Ethan had the father figure he often dreamed of. It pained her that she couldn't fulfill that part of his life, but she vowed to give him everything else he deserved. Fate intervened when Emma secured a housekeeping job at Jason's mansion. The offer seemed like a miracle. Better pay, a stable routine, and the chance to move Ethan to a safer neighborhood. With cautious hope, Emma accepted, determined to do her best despite knowing little about her new employer. On their first day at the mansion, the contrast between their lives couldn't have been more stark. The grand estate, with its ornate halls and towering ceilings, was overwhelming to Emma. Meanwhile, Jason barely acknowledged their arrival. Instead, Mr. Thomas laid down strict rules: stay professional, avoid private study, and keep interactions with Jason to a minimum. Emma tried to comply, but Ethan's natural curiosity quickly proved to be a challenge. While Emma focused on her duties, Ethan began exploring the mansion, fascinated by its sheer size and mystery. One evening, he wandered into Jason's study, a room filled with books, antiques, and memories Jason had tried to lock away. Jason was seated at his desk, lost in thought when Ethan approached him. Without hesitation, the boy asked, "Can you be my daddy?" Jason froze, stunned by the unexpected question. He looked at the boy, whose wide, hopeful eyes seemed to pierce through his guarded heart. Emma rushed in, mortified by Ethan's boldness, and apologized profusely. But even as she ushered Ethan out, Jason couldn't shake the boy's words. For the first time in years, something had touched the part of him he thought was long dead. That night, Jason found himself replaying Ethan's question in his mind. The innocence and sincerity of the boy's words unearthed memories he had buried, memories of his brother and the family he lost. Meanwhile, Emma worried about the impact Ethan's boldness might have on their new job. Though Jason maintained his distant demeanor, something had shifted. He began observing Ethan from afar, intrigued by the boy's energy and curiosity. For a man who had spent years shutting out the world, Ethan's presence brought an unfamiliar warmth to the cold halls of his home. Jason Harlow sat in his study late at night, the boy's question still haunting his thoughts. "Can you be my daddy?" It had been years since anyone had reached out to him emotionally, let alone with such innocence and directness. For someone who had long believed his world was better off isolated, Ethan's words cracked open a part of him he had tried to bury. The days that followed were unlike anything Jason had experienced in years. Ethan, with his boundless energy and curiosity, brought life into the mansion in ways no one had expected. The boy's laughter echoed through the grand halls, filling the silent spaces that had once amplified Jason's loneliness. It started with small gestures. Jason began noticing Ethan wandering through the mansion, peering at old portraits and artifacts as though trying to piece together its story. The boy's genuine curiosity reminded Jason of his own childhood when he and his brother Michael had explored every corner of the estate. Memories long buried began to surface, and Jason found himself drawn to the boy, even if only from a distance. The greenhouse project became a centerpiece of Jason and Ethan's growing relationship. Every afternoon, Ethan would run to the overgrown structure, eager to plant something new or clear away the remnants of its neglected past. Jason, initially hesitant, began looking forward to their time there, surprised by how much he enjoyed Ethan's company. One afternoon, Ethan paused his digging to ask Jason a question that caught him off guard. "Did you do this with your brother too?" Jason hesitated, his hand stilling over a bag of soil. "Michael loved this greenhouse," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "We used to spend hours here, dreaming about how we'd turn it into something incredible." "What happened to him?" Ethan asked innocently, his wide eyes searching Jason's face. Jason's throat tightened, but he forced himself to respond. "He passed away a long time ago. We had a fight before it happened, and I didn't get the chance to make things right." Ethan, sensing the pain behind Jason's words, placed a small hand on his arm. "Maybe you can make things right in other ways," he said softly. Jason blinked, caught off guard by the wisdom in the boy's words. As the greenhouse project flourished, so did Ethan's attachment to Jason. He would recount every moment spent with him during their evenings together, his excitement bubbling over. "Mr. Jason said he'll teach me how to grow tomatoes next," Ethan exclaimed one evening, his face alight with joy. Emma smiled at her son's happiness but couldn't ignore the unease growing in her heart. She had seen this kind of attachment before. Her late husband, Paul, had been the light of Ethan's life. Losing him had left a void that Emma worked tirelessly to fill, but seeing Ethan look up to Jason stirred fear she had tried to suppress. One evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, Emma decided to confront Jason. She found him in the study, staring at an old photograph of himself and Michael. "Can I help you, Ms. Scott?" Jason asked, his tone guarded but not unkind. Emma hesitated before stepping into the room. I wanted to talk about Ethan," she said, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "He's been through a lot. I've seen how much he looks up to you, but I need to know if you're in this for the long haul. He's already lost one father. I can't let him go through that kind of pain again." Jason's expression softened, and for a moment he seemed unsure how to respond. "I care about Ethan," he said finally. "More than I thought I could care about anyone. But I'm still figuring out what that means for me, and for him." That same evening, while cleaning the study, Emma stumbled upon an old photo album tucked inside one of the lower drawers. She had been tidying the shelves when the book fell to the floor, its pages flipping open to reveal a snapshot of Jason and Michael standing together in front of the greenhouse. Emma's breath caught as she stared at the image. Michael bore a striking resemblance to her late husband, Paul. The resemblance was so uncanny that Emma found herself wondering if there could be a connection between her family and Jason's. Unsure what to do with this discovery, Emma decided to keep the photo to herself for the time being. Her instincts told her that there was more to Jason's story than he let on, and she needed to understand it fully before raising any questions. Unaware of the tension brewing between Emma and Jason, Ethan continued to bring life into the mansion. He explored every corner, asking questions about the portraits on the walls and the stories behind the grand furniture. His natural curiosity extended to Jason, whom he peppered with questions about his past. One evening, while they played chess in the study, Ethan pointed to the photo Emma had found earlier. "Who's that with you?" he asked, his tone light but inquisitive. Jason glanced at the photo, his expression darkening slightly. "That's my brother, Michael," he said after a pause. "We used to do everything together, but we drifted apart." "Do you miss him?" Ethan asked, his voice soft. Jason nodded, the weight of his loss evident in his posture. Every day. Ethan tilted his head, his face thoughtful. Maybe he'd be happy to see you with us, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. Jason's heart tightened, the boy's words cutting through years of guilt and self-recrimination. The staff, initially unsure how to handle the boy's presence, soon warmed to him. Mr. Thomas, Jason's loyal but stern butler, had always kept the household running like clockwork. However, Ethan's charm managed to break through even his stoic demeanor. One afternoon, as Ethan played in the courtyard, he noticed Mr. Thomas supervising a delivery of flowers for the estate. "Are those for me?" Ethan asked, his eyes wide with excitement. Mr. Thomas, taken aback, smiled faintly and handed the boy a single rose. "Consider it a gift, young man," he said, his tone softer than anyone in the household had ever heard. Even Jason, who had been content to observe from afar, began to step into Ethan's world. It started with chess games in the study, where Ethan's quick wit and enthusiasm brought a spark to Jason's otherwise monotonous evenings. The boy's curiosity about the world of books and strategy games surprised Jason, who found himself genuinely enjoying their time together. Ethan's explorations eventually led him to the mansion's forgotten greenhouse. The sight of the overgrown plants and cracked glass filled him with a sense of wonder. "Why don't we use this place anymore?" he asked Jason one evening during their chess game. Jason hesitated. The greenhouse had been his brother Michael's sanctuary, a place filled with life and promise. After Michael's passing, Jason couldn't bear to enter it again. But Ethan's question lingered, and for reasons he couldn't explain, Jason agreed to let the boy explore it. The decision marked a turning point. Jason and Ethan spent their afternoons clearing away the overgrowth and planting new flowers. As they worked, Jason found himself sharing stories about Michael and the dreams they had once nurtured together. "We wanted to build something beautiful," he said one afternoon, his voice tinged with regret. "But life got in the way." Ethan listened intently, his innocent questions drawing out memories Jason hadn't spoken of in years. For the first time in what felt like forever, Jason felt a glimmer of connection, not just to Ethan, but to the parts of himself he had long shut away. While Jason and Ethan grew closer, Emma watched from a distance, her emotions a whirlwind of hope and fear. She had never seen her son so happy, but the growing bond between him and Jason worried her. Could a man like Jason, so used to isolation, truly commit to being part of Ethan's life? Or would this newfound connection end in heartbreak? One evening, Emma confided her concerns to Mr. Thomas. "I see how much Ethan looks up to Jason," she said, her voice low. "But what happens if Jason decides to shut him out? Ethan's already lost so much, I don't want him to lose again." Mr. Thomas, who had known Jason longer than anyone, offered a rare glimpse of insight. "Mr. Harlow has lived behind walls for so long that he's forgotten what it feels like to let someone in. Your son, he's changing that. Give him time." Emma wasn't sure whether to trust Mr. Thomas's words, but she resolved to be cautious. As much as she wanted Ethan to have the father figure he longed for, her priority was to protect him, no matter what. The greenhouse project became a centerpiece of Jason and Ethan's growing relationship. Every afternoon, Ethan would run to the overgrown structure, eager to plant something new or clear away the remnants of its neglected past. Jason, initially hesitant, began looking forward to their time there, surprised by how much he enjoyed Ethan's company. One afternoon, Ethan paused his digging to ask Jason a question that caught him off guard. "Did you do this with your brother too?" Jason hesitated, his hands stilling over a bag of soil. "Michael loved this greenhouse," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "We used to spend hours here dreaming about how we'd turn it into something incredible." "What happened to him?" Ethan asked innocently, his wide eyes searching Jason's face. Jason's throat tightened, but he forced himself to respond. "He passed away a long time ago. We had a fight before it happened, and I didn't get the chance to make things right." Ethan, sensing the pain behind Jason's words, placed a small hand on his arm. "Maybe you can make things right in other ways," he said softly. Jason blinked, caught off guard by the wisdom in the boy's words. As the greenhouse project flourished, so did Ethan's attachment to Jason. He would recount every moment spent with him during their evenings together, his excitement bubbling over. "Mr. Jason said he'll teach me how to grow tomatoes next," Ethan exclaimed one evening, his face alight with joy. Emma smiled at her son's happiness, but couldn't ignore the unease growing in her heart. She had seen this kind of attachment before. Her late husband, Paul, had been the light of Ethan's life. Losing him had left a void that Emma worked tirelessly to fill. But seeing Ethan look up to Jason stirred fears she had tried to suppress. One evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, Emma decided to confront Jason. She found him in the study, staring at an old photograph of himself and Michael. "Can I help you, Ms. Scott?" Jason asked, his tone guarded but not unkind. His scream echoed through the estate, sending Jason and Emma running to the greenhouse. They found Ethan lying on the ground, clutching his leg in pain. Jason's heart pounded as he knelt beside the boy, his hands trembling as he checked for injuries. "You're going to be okay, champ," Jason said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. He scooped Ethan into his arms and carried him back to the house, his protective instincts overwhelming every other thought. As the doctor examined Ethan, Jason refused to leave his side. Emma sat nearby, her worry evident in every glance she cast toward her son. For the first time, she saw Jason not as a distant millionaire, but as someone who truly cared for Ethan, someone who might even be willing to step into the role her son so desperately longed for him to fill. When the doctor finished bandaging Ethan's leg, the boy looked up at Jason with tear-filled eyes. "Thank you for taking care of me," he said softly. "You're like the dad I always wished I had." Jason froze, the boy's words striking a nerve he hadn't realized was so raw. In that moment, he felt a clarity he hadn't known in years. Ethan wasn't just a boy who had wandered into his life. He was a second chance, a way to rebuild the family Jason thought he had lost forever. Emma stepped closer, her expression softening. "Jason, none of us are perfect. But if you're serious about being in Ethan's life, you have to decide. He can't handle losing another father figure." Jason nodded, his gaze dropping to the photo album on the desk. "I lost my brother because I was too proud to make things right. Ethan, he reminds me of everything Michael and I dreamed of, everything I let slip away." Taking a deep breath, Jason opened up about the letter Michael had sent before his death, a plea for reconciliation that Jason had ignored. "I've carried that guilt every day," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't want to make the same mistake again." Emma placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Then don't," she said simply. "Ethan doesn't need you to be perfect. He just needs you to show up." The next morning, Jason made a conscious effort to be present for Ethan. He joined the boy at breakfast, asking about his favorite hobbies and sharing stories about his own childhood. Ethan's face lit up as Jason described the adventures he and Michael had shared, from building tree houses to planting the first seeds in the greenhouse. "You and your brother sound like superheroes," Ethan said with a grin. Jason chuckled, the boy's words warming his heart. "We weren't superheroes, champ, but we did our best." As Jason and Ethan grew closer, Emma found herself revisiting the photo she had discovered. The resemblance between Michael and Paul felt too significant to ignore. One evening, she decided to confront Jason about it. "Jason," she said, holding up the photo, "this might sound strange, but your brother looks exactly like my late husband. Is there any chance they could have known each other?" Jason stared at the photo, his brows furrowing in thought. "Michael was a private person," he said slowly. "It's possible he had connections I didn't know about, but I can't say for sure." Emma's instincts told her there was more to the story, but she decided not to push Jason further. Instead, she resolved to dig deeper into her own family's past, hoping to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, Ethan remained determined to restore the greenhouse to its former glory. Despite his injured leg, he sketched elaborate designs, eager to turn the space into a vibrant sanctuary. "I want it to be a place where everyone feels happy," he told Jason one afternoon, his enthusiasm infectious. Jason smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Then that's exactly what we'll do." For Jason, the greenhouse project became more than just a renovation. It was a symbol of hope, a chance to create something meaningful with Ethan and Emma. As the greenhouse began to take shape, Jason felt a growing sense of purpose. Ethan's enthusiasm and Emma's quiet resilience had brought life back into the mansion, but questions about their connection lingered in Jason's mind. The resemblance between Michael and Emma's late husband couldn't be a coincidence, and Jason knew he needed answers. One evening, he invited Emma to join him in the study. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, gesturing toward the photo of Michael. "If there's any chance our families are connected, I think we should find out." Emma hesitated, her emotions a mix of curiosity and fear. "I've been trying to piece things together, but it feels like a puzzle with missing pieces," she admitted. Together they began searching through Jason's family archives, uncovering letters and photographs that painted a picture of Michael's life before his estrangement from Jason. Among the documents, they found a letter addressed to Rebecca Scott, Emma's late mother-in-law. The letter hinted at a close friendship between Michael and Paul, confirming their suspicions. Unaware of the discoveries unfolding in the study, Ethan continued to focus on the greenhouse. One afternoon, he presented Jason and Emma with a list of plants he wanted to grow, including a small section dedicated to his father's favorite flowers. "Mom says Dad loved daisies," Ethan said, his voice bright with excitement. "Can we plant them too?" Jason's heart ached as he realized how much Ethan's memories of his father mirrored his feelings about Michael. The boy's innocence and optimism reminded him of the family he had lost, and the family he was beginning to build anew. Armed with the letter, Emma and Jason began piecing together the connection between their families. They learned that Michael and Paul had been childhood friends who had drifted apart as adults. The revelation brought both clarity and pain, as it underscored the losses they had each endured. One evening, as they sat together in the greenhouse, Jason shared his deepest regret with Emma. "I should have reached out to Michael before it was too late," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Maybe if I had, things would have been different." Emma placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but firm. "We can't change the past, Jason, but we can honor their memories by doing better now." Her words struck a chord, and Jason resolved to take a more active role in Ethan's life. Just as Jason was beginning to embrace his role as a father figure, a crisis tested his resolve. Ethan, eager to show off his progress in the greenhouse, accidentally knocked over a fragile glass panel, cutting his hand in the process. The sight of Ethan's blood sent Jason into a panic, but he quickly sprang into action, bandaging the boy's wound and reassuring him. "It's okay, champ," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I've got you." The incident left Jason shaken but more determined than ever to protect Ethan and give him the stability he deserved. Watching Jason care for Ethan, Emma felt her own walls begin to crumble. She had spent years shielding herself and her son from disappointment, but Jason's actions showed her that he was willing to step up, not just as a mentor, but as a father. That evening, as they stood together in the greenhouse, Emma turned to Jason and said, "Ethan needs you. And I think we do too." Jason's response was simple but heartfelt. "I won't let you down. I promise." In the weeks following Ethan's accident, the mansion became a hub of activity. Jason, inspired by Ethan's vision for the greenhouse, decided to expand the project into a community initiative. He announced plans to create a foundation in Michael's name, aimed at supporting underprivileged children and families. Emma, initially hesitant about the idea, agreed to help manage the foundation. Her experience as a single mother gave her valuable insight into the needs of the community, and her partnership with Jason grew stronger as they worked toward a shared goal. Jason's relationship with Ethan flourished. They spent hours working on the greenhouse, sharing stories about Michael and Paul, and planning future projects together. Ethan's confidence blossomed under Jason's guidance, and he began to see himself as an integral part of their growing family. One afternoon, as they finished planting a bed of daisies, Ethan looked up at Jason and said, "I think Dad would have liked you." Jason smiled, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and gratitude. "I hope so, champ," he replied. As the foundation gained momentum, Emma revisited the discoveries she and Jason had made about their families. She decided to visit her late husband's grave, bringing Jason and Ethan along for support. Standing by the headstone, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. "Paul would be so proud of you, Ethan," she said, her voice steady, "and I think he'd be happy knowing we've found a new family." Jason placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll make sure his memory lives on, in everything we do." Months later, the mansion was unrecognizable. What had once been a quiet, somber estate was now a lively hub filled with activity. The greenhouse, fully restored, served as the centerpiece of the foundation's work, hosting workshops and community events that brought people together. Jason, once a solitary figure, thrived in his new role as a mentor and leader. His interactions with the children and families who benefited from the foundation brought a sense of fulfillment he hadn't known in years. Emma and Ethan moved into a cozy cottage on the estate grounds, a gift from Jason that symbolized his commitment to their shared future. The cottage, filled with Ethan's artwork and Emma's personal touches, quickly became a home filled with love and laughter. Jason visited often, joining them for meals and helping Ethan with his school projects. Over time, the three of them formed a bond that felt as natural as it was unexpected. One evening, as they shared dinner in the greenhouse, Jason raised a glass and said, "To Michael and Paul. Their memory brought us together, and their legacy will carry us forward." Emma and Ethan raised their glasses in agreement, their faces lit with warmth and gratitude. As they sat together, Jason reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. "Sometimes life gives us second chances in the most unexpected ways," he said, "and when it does, it's up to us to embrace them."